at all why we would expect that those cases would prevail. There's concern that somebody might smoke a marijuana which had been subjected to paraquat and become ill, but we know of no deaths and no serious injuries resulting from the use of paraquat. And the most important thing is that we demonstrate to our South American friends that we too will eradicate crops that are illegally grown in this country. I visited Hawaii, where it's a very substantial amount of crops grown, and spoken to with the law enforcement officials there on their efforts. It's not an easy task, and it's not an easy task in South America. Drug growers are very adept at raising their crops up in the clouds if you have mountains, so they're hard to find with airplanes, but we're getting increasingly better at spotting new types of techniques, infrared techniques and others will help us locate large crop areas that can be controlled. The individual patches of marijuana interspersed in forests and other crops are more difficult, but that doesn't mean that it isn't all our responsibility to try to do this.
Do you think the results of the task force in the South Florida and the other task force around the United States, you think it's good results? What do you have until now?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing some substantial. Now, keep in mind that those task forces are to supplement the existing effort,
That's right.
but they're to be focused on the organized crime networks. And these are what we call long-term investigative efforts. These forces are not to be used just to go out and arrest a street pusher. These forces are to try to get at these enterprises, the organized crime units, some of the old traditional groups, some new units making large profits on drugs. That's going to take some time to develop those cases, to develop the informants, to put the undercover agents in place, so that when we make arrests, we don't just content ourselves with a fellow on the street who's selling to somebody who wants to consume drugs. We want the wholesalers, and we want the producers and the major distributors, and that will take a while. We're not expecting instant statistics. If we were to produce all kinds of statistics on this thing, one might look to see what kind of people we were arresting. To arrest the drug pushers on the street is the job of local law enforcement. If we got involved too heavily in that, we're going to miss the main part of the operation. And until we get the main part of the operation, we're not going to have achieved much success. Some statistics, but not much success. We had over 800 arrests on what I call quality drug investigations in the fiscal year 1982. We had that many in the first 6 months of fiscal year 1983 by the FBI alone. That's not the Drug Enforcement Administration or all the other agents, just my organization. And we've only been in drugs a year and a half. Yeah.
One last question. I think it's also a very important point of view you touched today in your conference. I think you like more not to be as a repression force in the United States, more than you should prevent the drug use in the United States. I think here in the United States, your government, these parents association, are trying to fight against the demand, against what is happening to the youth people of your country. What will be your what you will tell to the young people also of Colombia to fight against the drug and the drug business?
It's a two-handed approach. Really three if we have to deal with treatment of people who are already using drugs, and we do. But one of those is to enforce the laws, respect for the law and enforcement of the laws that were designed by our people to reflect their desire to curb drug trafficking. The other is to try to deal with the demand, with the addiction, with the need for drugs or the interest in drugs. And that's a process of education. We can help with it. As I mentioned, we're working with our sports, our major sports figures.
You give some statistics really about marijuana. 59% of the young people go to marijuana, 60% to cocaine.
But I mentioned
statistics that are really...
Yes, and I mentioned also some straightforward information, like some of the literature that's being prepared. A few years ago, for instance, in marijuana, many people thought marijuana was harmless. And so we said, well, it's a harmless drug. Now the medical data is very clear that marijuana is harmful. It is bad for our children. That information has to be conveyed not just to 16, 8-year-old young people, but to children who are in the elementary school age, who are now learning about drugs at the same time as puberty. And it's important to us that we stop them by every educational means possible from developing an interest and then a dependence on drugs. The erosive and damaging effect on this country has been beyond price. The cost in human suffering is enormous. The cost to us in violent crime, the cost to us in the economy itself, in medical treatment, the loss of productive effort by people who would normally be working not under the influence of drugs. We can't accept it. It's causing more crime and more grief than any other single activity in our country. And that's why we're depending upon our relationships with countries such as Bolivia, from which these crops have traditionally been grown, to help us as friends in reducing the available supply, while at the same time we help reduce the demand in this country.
Thank you.